I was just going to ask you to talk about the reasons you feel that students, mostly in general, kind of try to shy away in most cases. I know there's obviously some cases where they don't, but just talk about that.
Well, first let's start with me. Why am I a French teacher? This is the God's honest truth. Mom told me when I was in 8th grade that when I went to 9th grade I had to take a foreign language. So I signed up for Spanish like my brother.
Mm-hmm.
But all the Spanish classes were full. So I ended up in French.
Okay.
And then 16 years later I had a PhD in French and I'm teaching French. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
What does that tell you? It had nothing to do with some sort of innate desire to be a French teacher or to speak another language.
It all starts with just a requirement.
There was a requirement there. All right? That's got me started. Now, we don't start students learning a foreign language when it's a game and when it's fun.
Mm-hmm.
On campus we started a community language school, after school program for kids. Why? Because all the research shows that the human brain, which will learn another language like it learned the first one, just exposure to it, that's what our mind does. The more we expose ourselves to a language, our brain will wire the wire pathways to accommodate it. Okay, but it turns out that if you start learning a second language after a certain point,
Mm-hmm.
all right, and I've seen different set studies, but basically age 16 or 14 is kind of key. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
Your plasticity in the brain is less, so you don't wire it the same way. One study I saw that was very interesting showed the difference between Vietnamese immigrants who came at different ages.
Right.
All right? And the kids who came at age 2 and they were bilingual in Vietnamese and English used the same parts of their brain for grammar control and pronunciation in both languages.
Mm-hmm.
But kids who came to America when they were age 10 or later did not use the same part of the brain for pronunciation and grammar control. They were fluent as far as you could tell.
Right.
Okay? But they're not using the same part of the brain. Well, that suggested that maybe one of the problems with teaching accent and pronunciation to older people is that literally you're using different parts of the brain, different pathways than native speakers use.
Right.
Okay? So the idea that we do not require people to learn a foreign language young enough means that we're going to fall into the following. Okay? Fear, anxiety, issues feeling stupid, and that explains why people who are adults avoid foreign languages like the plague.
So,
Okay.
it's like music. Kids that start earlier are better, and it's one thing that might need to be done is that we start requiring, rather than wait until high school and saying you need this to graduate.
Yeah.
Maybe start in 4th grade with their music and their special, after like programs and start adding foreign languages as a. It's interesting.
Because adults, let's look at adults now. So why do adults? Okay, so you could take high school foreign language, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But there's psychological barriers, there's cultural barriers.
Mm-hmm.
Psychological barriers for adolescents, for adults, for kids in college include, when I speak the language I feel stupid. It makes people nervous.
Right.
In a foreign language class, who's the boss? Who knows all the facts? The teacher.
Mm-hmm.
When you speak, it's not like math class or science class where you're using English.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? You don't know half the rules. You're always at a loss. Kids compare themselves to other students in the class, and not that they should, but they do.
Mm-hmm.
People have false expectations of what they should be able to do as an adult learner.
Right.
Okay? So that creates foreign language anxiety, and that can shut people up, make them change their degree, procrastinate. Half the students in UCA's beginning language classes are juniors and seniors. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. Why? People are putting it off. Why do art majors put it off? Well, there are multiple intelligences where you've got people who self-select into their strengths. If you're an art major, maybe you're really great with your hands, with vision, with color, with tactile kinesthetic intelligence. Maybe you're not so good with mathematical logical thinking. Well, guess what? A lot of art majors who can't do math can't do foreign language either, because they are related, different parts of the brain. So that makes it hard for people then. It's more of a challenge, especially for adults. Okay. Cultural factors. Well, that word "fern," which we used to have in our department name, we changed it to world languages. Why? Because Americans all too often are isolated from other cultures, such that "fern" becomes a negative concept. So studying another language becomes a threat to your own identity. Okay? The fact that we need it, though, was driven home to me when I visited a milk farm in Wisconsin, where my family had grown up, and the guy had all these Mexicans helping him milk his cows. Well, that farmer grew up in a society that did not need a foreign language when he was a kid, right? My generation. But now he had to speak Spanish with his workers to milk his cows. That tells you globalization has hit home, so that even a farmer in the middle of Wisconsin could use a little bit of Spanish. Okay. So the fact of the matter is, we're a big country, we're very isolated. There's a whole wing of American culture that's very, I'm proud to be an American and all that stuff. And that celebrates English and English only, okay? All the English only movements a lot of times are based on fear. We never had English as the official language of the United States. Why is it all of a sudden a big topic in the last 15 years?
Right.
Linguistic diversity, cultural diversity makes people defensive. When you get defensive, you get afraid. That's why I use that term xenolinguophobia with you.
Yes. Can you talk about specific reasons or examples that, like, just maybe it's arrogance or maybe it's ignorance and some American mindsets that might shun world languages, other languages?
I think it's a combination of mostly ignorance and also, but ignorance based on insularity. I've been watching Obama, all right? He steadfastly refuses to mention anything about foreign languages with education. We need math, science, okay? I think he does that on purpose. Because if he used the word foreign languages and became a proponent for being bilingual, that would be used against him.
Right.
Because he's already considered a foreigner,
Right.
Okay? And so I'm watching this Democrat, who I'm happy to vote for, steadfastly neglect one of the most obvious things that we need to do with our education nowadays. Okay, we have government programs to help us all learn what they call critical languages: Chinese, Arabic, all right, Russian. These are all languages that we need. Okay, Farsi. So the government, on the one hand, recognizes that and has programs to encourage it, but one of our, we can't even make it an educational goal in the presidential campaign because we're afraid of being called a communist or, a foreign sympathizer. I think that's part of it, because otherwise I can't figure out why you wouldn't mention the fact that maybe being bilingual would be helpful as well.
Be helpful. And is there just a laziness in America that just says it's too hard to learn?
I don't think it's laziness. I think Americans are, the hardest. I think that it's
right.
It's nothing moral. It's for a long time it was a lack of understanding that it was important. It was needed. You grew up in the middle of Minnesota like I did. When I was a kid, there was no cultural diversity. Everyone's a bunch of farmers and, all right? There was no literal reason to speak a foreign language, okay?